Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. Now, I'd hoped to avoid this whole JonTron mess as it had really nothing to do with video games. This is a gaming channel, not a political one, and so I was content to leave well enough alone, until Playtonic decided to remove JonTron from their upcoming game Yooka-Laylee. Now, JonTron, as I'm sure you've heard by now, seems everyone on the internet has, came under a huge amount of fire recently due to some statements and claims that have been deemed to be racist. Now, this happened during a debate JonTron had with a Twitch streamer known as Destiny, which many would deem to be a train wreck of an event. And to be frank, I'm scarcely surprised. Destiny seems to be an exceptionally good debater with a large amount of practice and experience, whereas JonTron is an internet comedian. Who do you think is going to remain cool under pressure in such a scenario? Now, during that debate, JonTron made some statements that were factually wrong and others that were I suppose puzzling would be the correct word for it. Now, regardless, JonTron received massive amounts of hate being heaped on him from every corner, and the other day, it continued in the form of Playtonic Games, the developers of Yooka-Laylee, deciding that, in light of JonTron's apparent personal views, it would be best to remove JonTron from the project. In an upcoming patch that will be posted prior to the game's release, JonTron's vocal lines will be replaced with someone else's. Now, in a statement made to GamesIndustry.biz, the developers had the following to say. JonTron is a talented voice presenter who we were initially, 2 years ago, happy to include as a voice contributor in our game. However, in light of his recent personal viewpoints, we've made the decision to remove JonTron's inclusion in the game via a forthcoming content update. We would like to make it absolutely clear that we do not endorse or support JonTron's personal viewpoints and that, as an external fan contributor, he does not represent Playtonic in any capacity. Playtonic is a studio that celebrates diversity in all forms and strives to make games that everyone can enjoy. As such, we deeply regret any implied association that could make players feel anything but 100% comfortable in our game worlds or distract from the incredible goodwill and love shown by our fans and Kickstarter backers. Now, in response to this, JonTron stated on his Twitter feed, "Unfortunate to see Playtonic remove me from Yooka-Laylee, but I understand their decision. I wish them the best with their launch." Now, I find it interesting that less than a week ago we were discussing NieR and his overt racism and hatred of white people and how a massive amount of people were wanting his removal from BioWare, which did not happen. And here we have JonTron at seemingly the opposite end of the spectrum, and he has been removed from Yooka-Laylee. And I have to backtrack here a little bit because I know a lot of people are going to comment, yes, I know NieR no longer works for BioWare, but he wasn't fired or let go. It was merely he was on there till the project was finished. But indeed, there does seem to be a certain cognitive dissonance in Playtonic's statement, even when they state very clearly, Playtonic is a studio that celebrates diversity in all forms, while actively distancing themselves from a person whose personal views do not match their own. This is not only hypocritical in the extreme, it's also rather cowardly in my opinion. But does it make their decision wrong? On a moral level, I do have something to say that we'll get to in a few minutes, but are they wrong on a professional or legal level? Well, firstly, you have to bear in mind that I am approaching this from a viewpoint of a U.S. citizen. I know that labor laws and even freedom of speech is defined differently for Playtonic as they are a UK-based company. That said, JonTron is not actually an employee, which makes this situation very different than the one concerning BioWare and NieR. The closest approximation I could make would be to that of a subcontractor, where JonTron and his brand are a separate entity being leased or hired out by Playtonic for a specific task or set of tasks. He's not an actual employee, and so your standard set of labor laws would not apply in this case. And in this case, I can't think of any legal reason why Playtonic would be in the wrong to remove JonTron from the project. Also, JonTron is not an employee. Playtonic does not have any need to show any loyalty or solidarity to JonTron in any way. What they did here was an attempt to distance themselves from a socio-political quagmire, and instead of their intended efforts, had the exact opposite effect. Now, currently, the Steam forums have exploded, with both sides of the spectrum going at each other in a frenzy of verbal attacks both against each other and against Playtonic. Many decrying Playtonic's actions, while many more are defending them. And also a fair amount of people holding, interestingly enough, reasoned discussions and debates with each other, which was a bit of a pleasant surprise, to be honest. And it's not common that I see topics such as this spring up a series of actual discussions and sharing of thought between opposite sides of the spectrum, but it was heartening to see nonetheless. Now, the main thread of those discussions seem to be centered around the massive amount of refunds that Yooka-Laylee has been seeing since it became public that JonTron was being removed from the project. But, as always, when a situation becomes political, everyone and their cousin has their own thoughts on the matter, and some of them are certainly well-reasoned. Case in point, the following. Playtonic is the only bigot, from a black person. I was seriously hyped for this game. John's involvement in this got me so much more invested in this title. Yes, I've also watched the entire debate that gave some an excuse to hate on John. John made a few statements that were not factual and not well thought out because he was getting chewed out on the spot and panicked a bit. And for that, he already apologized for. Now, most of what he said was perfectly factual and perhaps too unapologetic for some. But he said nothing racist. He said nothing bigoted. People who are parroting that he is are either of these two things. They gullibly believe whatever they hear, or they're just one of the many cry-bullies that are widely adored by popular culture right now. Now, like I said in the title, I'm a black dude. Not that it should matter, but otherwise everyone likes to throw around white supremacist, racist, Nazi, etc. Otherwise, so I feel obligated to say it. But it shouldn't matter what the color of your skin is. I get that people get overly sensitive when it comes to any comments regarding race and immigration. Guess I just have thicker skin. But if some black folk like me couldn't care less, don't find anything he said remotely offensive or even provocative, why do you think this sort of harsh overreaction is in any way justified? Whom exactly are you speaking for or trying to defend with such an action? Because it's not me. Despite claiming otherwise, by doing this to John, you've made your game highly political. Yet I'm still willing to repurchase this game if you come to your senses and reinstate all of John's content. Otherwise, please look up the definition of the term bigot. By definition, Playtonic is the only bigot in this scenario. And for the record, the definition of the word bigot is as defined by Merriam-Webster, a person who is obstinately or intolerantly devoted to his or her own opinions and prejudices, especially one who regards or treats the members of a group, as a racial or ethnic group, with hatred and intolerance, or more specifically and reduced form, a person who strongly and unfairly dislikes other people, ideas, etc. In which case, Playtonic's actions could be ascribed as being bigoted. But is it wrong? Of course, all of JonTron's 3 million subscribers would most likely say yes, absolutely. But remember what I said a little bit earlier about JonTron not actually being an employee. You see, that changes the landscape a little bit. From a strictly moral standpoint, Playtonic has no reason to feel or show any loyalty to JonTron as a subcontractor. He's not a member of the staff, and as such, really shouldn't be subject to the same rules. I personally do not feel that Playtonic did anything wrong in that regard. If they stood with JonTron, they would be risking their own livelihood, as well as the livelihood of their staff, and possibly even their whole company for what amounts to an outside entity. While I don't agree with their decision at all, I do understand it, as does JonTron. However, there are the accusations that Playtonic had been removing comments and threads discussing refunds of the game, which does put us into the realm of direct censorship, although it is one aspect that I've not encountered yet in my short tenure as a gaming critic at all. Now, you see, there is only one reason for a company to do such a thing, which is an attempt to contain a flood. However, in this particular instance, it appears that Playtonic was attempting to keep the dam from breaking by sticking their fingers in a single hole. The company is now bleeding pre-order purchases like a sieve once people found out that JonTron was not going to be in the game, and realistically, that is very much their right. Despite what some people may or may not think about JonTron personally, there are a great many people out there that purchased the game because of JonTron's contribution to it. With his removal from the game, they are now seeking refunds, and it's really quite understandable. You will never find me arguing against people's decisions to refund a game if that is what they want to do. It is critically important that you do exercise this right if you so choose. Many times when dealing with publishers or games developers, it is the only thing that will make them stand up and take notice. Speak with your wallets, and a great many people appear to be doing exactly that. However, what you will find me doing is publicly decrying any games development company that attempts to silence their consumer base in order to make themselves look better. It is beyond deplorable, and it still never serves to amaze me just how stupid the people are that are making these decisions. Do you think that sweeping it under the rug will make it go away? Do you think that deleting a few comments will make it all better? No, that's not how the world works. This is not reality. When your consumer base finds out that you have been attempting to shut them up, they become justifiably pissed off and no longer want to support you or your games. I would like to draw your attention to one last thing. Crave Online said the following at the end of their report, which was a very clear political and social bias that also served to turn their nose up at the complaints of those upset over Playtonic's decision. They said, many of those commenting are highlighting their very tenuous grasp on what does or does not constitute as censorship, with a common theme amongst these complaints being that Playtonic is somehow censoring JonTron by way of no longer wanting him to appear in Yooka-Laylee. According to these criticisms, Playtonic should remain beholden to its decision to include JonTron in the game, even after he's made a series of sweeping, ignorant statements regarding entire races of people. Fortunately, that isn't the way the world works, and freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences. While YouTube may afford JonTron the ability to keep his job in the public eye even after his racially charged comments, a privilege that isn't available to any other celebrities away from the internet, that doesn't mean that other companies need to be complicit with his ideologies too. And this, I have a severe problem with. In spite of all of this, whatever JonTron's beliefs are, it is not up to Playtonic to claim whether they are right or wrong. It is not up to this journalist to claim whether or not he is right or wrong. There are still personally held beliefs that ultimately should remain personal, not professional. While Playtonic made a decision that they thought was best for them in this situation, quote, being complicit should not factor into it. But in the end, they made their choice, and they are bleeding pre-orders because of it. But please, let me know your thoughts. Was Playtonic right to remove JonTron from the project and or delete user comments in a vain attempt to prevent a mass exodus? Tell me all about it down in the comments. And while you're at it, don't forget to like and share. If you're new to the channel, please do remember to subscribe. It helps more than you might think. If you feel like supporting the channel even more, there is a link to my Patreon on your screen. Please feel free to go throw $1 or whatever you feel like at it. Every bit goes directly into the channel. Also, links to my Twitter and Facebook, amongst others, are down in the description down below. Please do follow me there if you want to stay up to date on new videos and special appearances, as well as some giveaways that may be coming up shortly. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and thanks for watching.